Started? I feel like maybe it started, but I don't know. There we go, now it started. Name times for you. This is Winter's Daydream, which I don't consider to be lame, but I didn't name the company. Maybe it's a little bit lame. But I mostly like this game. Good visual novel game. Just a nice, sweet, game. Because it's like a little bit corny, but it's. I feel like it's silly and sweet on purpose. It's meant to be a bit sappy. Alright, it isn't snowing outside, but it is rather cold. I can hear a bitter wind blowing against the window panes, making them rattle. This old wooden house is poorly insulated, and the cool air snakes in through gaps and cracks. The air swirls about the living room, nipping at my fingers and my nose, even as I try to burrow the lower half of my body beneath the kotatsu. I pop a segment of orange, now devoid of white pith, into my mouth, and chew slowly. My teeth break the translucent skin of the orange, and its juice flows freely across my tongue. I love that description of him eating the orange. It's the second time that I read it, and I was like, had to make sure to read that whole thing again. It's sweet and syrupy, and I think it'll taste even better with tea. Umeko. Right, I'll go and get things ready. You wait here, dear. Wait, who's Umeko? I watch mutely as my grandmother bustles off to the kitchen. Though she's a young girl now, younger even than me, her movements still remind me of my grandmother's. They look less painful. Her back no longer bent double, and her feet no longer shuffling, but she has the same dreamlike sway to her step. It's almost like she doesn't quite inhabit the same world I do. Maybe for now she really doesn't. I don't know what mysticism turned her into a young girl again, but I do wonder, will the magic work once more when we get to the shrine? Will we really see my grandfather? I suppose it's always possible. Stranger things have happened. Have they, though? My grandmother and I sip tea for a while in companionable silence, while the wind continues to howl and moan outside. Then, when all the stars are twinkling in the sky, my grandmother decides to get changed into her kimono. She exits the room, leaving me with my third cup of tea for the evening. I savor it slowly, letting the tea slide down my throat and into my stomach. I swear I can feel it diminishing the subtle chill of wintertime. There's nothing quite as replenishing as my grandmother's tea. While I drink my tea, I glance outside the window, curiously. The stars are well and truly out now. They hang over this small, sleepy village silently, all watching us from above. Those stars are boiling, burning masses of plasma. They look oddly cold and alone, stranded up there in space. They twinkle prettily enough, but there's something almost lonely about them. There are two particularly bright stars shining away in the sky, even more magnificent than their rather more distant cousins. I think they're called Polaris and Capella. Running between these two stars should be the Giraffe constellation, a curious collection of stars that supposedly make up the shape of everyone's favorite long-necked mammal. When I was a kid, my grandmother tried to teach me about the stars. I was never all that interested, but he engaged me, grandfather, sorry, not grandmother, he engaged me on the subject enough that quite a lot of it stuck. He told me the stars were romantic. He said the vast, mostly unexplored annals of space had gripped his heart from an early age and refused to let go. He didn't fuss about things like green men or unidentified flying objects. He told me space was amazing enough without introducing any what-ifs. My grandmother's always been fond of the stars, too. I think grandfather was the one who taught her about them, just like he taught me. He might not be here anymore, but the knowledge he imparted to me and my grandmother lives on, shining forever. I blink. Polaris is particularly bright tonight. I've become rather proficient at spotting Polaris thanks to my grandfather's tuition. And I remember that when you see Polaris, Capella is only a stone's throw away. Then there's the giraffe. There's something I've come to like about the stars. They don't really change, and when they do it so incrementally you can't notice. If you're standing in the right place during the right season, and all the conditions are right, you'll always be able to find the stars you're searching for. They're just like old friends, Polaris and Capella. And over there, a little further back, would be Betelgeuse. This star, burning a fierce yellow in the patchwork of space above, forms one of the corners of the constellation Orion, with Rigel in the opposite corner. I wonder if I can see any other constellations. What about the Winter Diamond? If my grandfather was with me, I'm sure he could find them. As I peer scouring through the sky, the scent of green tea slowly permeates the room. I can taste it on my tongue every time I breathe in. Green tea, the faint aroma of wood, and snow. The stars aren't alone anymore. Framed against the black twinkling backdrop are small flakes of powdery snow gently drifting and pirouetting down toward the earth like a shower of white flowers. Now I can't help but ponder. Was it snowing the day my grandmother met my grandfather? Oh, you, a soft voice calls to me, drawing my thoughts away from galaxies. I turn my head. There she is in her kimono. Aww. There, standing in the doorway of the living room, is my grandmother. But she doesn't look like my grandmother. She has a shy smile on her face, and her head is downturned, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders in a wave. And as for her kimono, it's beautiful. It wraps around her body, concealing her curves. Stop thinking about your grandmother's curves, man. She's straight up and down like a Kokeshi doll, almost featureless in that traditionally Japanese way that denotes simple feminine beauty. The kimono was a perfect find, despite being almost a century old. It's a soft, pale, pink decoration, here with flowers. The sleeves are long and graceful, and they swish with the slightest of movements. Well, what do you think? My grandmother looks at the tatami mats. Oops. I think I skipped something. Let's just keep going. I haven't worn a kimono in a while, and I forgot how fiddly they are. I frown, staring, because I don't quite know what to say. What can I say? It's hard to believe the woman standing there before me is my own grandmother. I've never seen her like this before. Young, carefully made up, and full of life. You're staring at me rather intently, you. Do I look bad? My fingers have been sore and numb these last few years. I've hardly been able to do a button-up, let alone put on a kimono. I must have lost a knack. No, it isn't. That isn't it. I don't think you look bad, really. Really? I think so, anyway. Not that I'm a great judge, but I offer her what I hope is a reassuring smile. You look nice, in my opinion. At least, I don't know how much it's worth, though. Oh, well, thank goodness for that. Relief floods my grandmother's face, making it look prettier than ever before. Standing in the doorframe, contrasted against the plain cream walls, she really does stand out like one of the brightest stars in the night sky. Brighter, even. Jesus Christ, man. Get a hold of yourself. Go take a cold shower. Beetlejuice has nothing on her. Oh my god. I did worry that the design I suppose she is pretty. I did worry that the design might be too flashy. After all, I am an old lady. I really should act my age. No way. You don't look a day over 16. Why, thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. It's factual, I guess. Dermatologists everywhere are baffled. Just how did you get such a youthful physique? Stop talking about physique, man. My grandmother pretends to ponder, holding one finger over her lip. Eating a lot of vegetables, I suppose, breathing in the cool country air, and a little bit of magic, of course. Of course. My grandmother's fingers, the pattern of her kimono, her expression thoughtful. You know, when my mother started to get up in years, she only wore black. Like she was dressing for a funeral. That's what I said, but my mother told me black was very formal and dignified, and I should stop being so cheeky. She'd be livid if she knew I was wearing a pink in my 80s. I don't think black would suit you. It would make everything seem too somber. Exactly. I don't want the visit to Jinguji's shrine to mourn my past. I want to celebrate it. I'm sure that would make Grandpa happy. I hope so too. My grandmother cast a small glance at Grandfather's shrine. It looked strangely solemn tonight, though he's smiling warmly in his photograph. Maybe it's because of the cold. The dark makes everything seem gloomy. Yukinari might be dead, but I'm not. As long as I'm alive, I'm going to hold his memory within my heart. I'll try to remember the fond times for his sake, the way he could continue to live inside of me. Grandpa was so full of life. It's hard to believe he's really gone. It's been a full year, and still, I always thought he would be the one to outlive me. But here you are, and I've never seen you so radiant. You've got a youthful glow I can't quite put my finger on. Oh, hush you. My grandmother silences me, but she's laughing. I know she isn't really upset. Not anymore, at least. The night is far too special to allow ourselves to wallow in what could have been. It's the same as space. Like my grandfather said, space is such an amazing, magnificent place filled with unexplored and uncharted stars, planets, galaxies, that it's silly to fixate so much on the possible existence of aliens. What? Are we getting a little sidetracked here? It's like every damn time. Why worry about that when there's already so much incredible star stuff to ruminate over? Oh, you dear, can I ask you a favor? What? Could you tighten my obi for me? I'm worried it's a bit loose. I look at my grandmother's complex clothes dubiously. I wouldn't know how. I'm sure you could figure it out, a smart boy like you. Don't you want to help your old grandmother in her twilight years? Stop trying to blackmail me. But you're so good with your hands. Hisako was always telling me how handy you are in the kitchen. Wow. Can you take a look at least? I'm not confident in my skills like I used to be, and I've never been that skilled in putting on kimonos anyway. My mother always used to scold me about how sloppy I was. Well, I could try to help, but don't expect miracles. I won't. I'm not that unreasonable. I've already had my fill of miracles today. Well, alright, I'll give you a look, but don't expect too much. I'm not an expert. I get to my feet with no small amount of effort. I was getting pretty cozy beneath the kotatsu and walking over to my grandmother. I stand behind my grandmother and examine her obi. Though there's a decorative ribbon in the front, the real obi ties at the back in a typical box-shaped shape. Now that I look at it a little more closely, the ribbon does look a bit skewed, but I'm not exactly sure how to remedy this. I reach out with my fumbling fingers and try to adjust the ribbon. My hands, though deft and skillful, according to my mother, are ill-equipped to deal with this challenge. Putting on a kimono really is difficult. It's an art form in and of itself, like painting. No wonder it took my grandmother so long to get ready. It's just why Otoko is so virulently opposed to the idea of wearing a kimono. Not only are they old-fashioned, but they're also fiddly. After a minute or so, however, I think I've managed to tighten the obi a little. Plus, the ribbon is more or less centered now. It's by no means perfect, but I tried my best. I hope this is good enough. I'm afraid the whole thing will fall apart the moment my fingers leave the obi, but that, fortunately, is not the case. The length of the fabric remains where it should be, firm and immovable. My grandmother smiles happily and does a twirl, as though testing the strength of her newly tied obi. Oh, it's wonderful, you. I feel so much lighter now. Don't spin around too much or it might come undone. I don't want the fruits of my hard work to be ruined. Don't worry so much. I know you did a great job, sweetie. Thanks. You're a star. And with a smile, my grandmother kisses me swiftly on the cheek. Ah! My grandmother used to kiss me a lot when I was younger. I wasn't a big fan of her kisses, particularly when her lips were so dry and she smelled so strongly of hinoki wood. She still smells a little of hinoki wood. It's a distinctively musky aroma I remember from my childhood, but it doesn't bother me now the way it used to. In fact, it's rather comforting. Though the girl standing before me looks completely and utterly different to my grandmother, and she's still the same person deep down inside. Look at his mouth open, like, no matter what she looks like, the fact will never change. That fact will never change. Now, my grandmother inclines her head toward the doorway. Shall we get going? I think it might save when it cuts like one of those scenes, but I'm not really sure. So I'm gonna wait till an actual scene change. Right. You wouldn't want to keep Grandpa waiting. Yukinari. My grandmother casts a plaintive glance at my grandfather's shrine. When her eyes meet those of his in the portrait, she sighs softly. It would be wonderful if I could see him again. All sorts of incredible things have happened already. What's one more on the list? You're right. I have to believe. She pauses. No, I will believe. My grandmother bows her head in grandfather's direction. Her hands pressed together in her front. I really want it to work out. I feel like I'm going to be probably as brokenhearted as they are if it doesn't. Please wait for me. I'll be there soon, I promise. Probably not quite as brokenhearted as they are. Especially her. Alright. Damn it. I want to stop now, but I think I should just keep going. I'm like, I need to know what happens at the shrine. And then after the shrine I can stop. The walk to the shrine is uneventful. Relatively uneventful. It's still snowing, albeit gently, and the flakes land on my head and the tip of my nose. Some even catch in my eyelashes. When I move to wipe them away, the slightest brush from my warm fingertips make them melt. Rivulets of cool water drip down my cheek and forehead, but I pay them little heed. I feel underdressed compared to my grandmother, who's clad in her kimono and obi, and her little wooden gaita clacking against the ground, but I don't really have anything to change into. I'm not the only one to worry about fashion at the best of times, and it's not as though I'm going out on a date. Not like my grandmother. It's almost like something from Cinderella, I find myself thinking, and not for the first time in this strange, surreal day. If you think you're right, here we have the young girl all dolled up to go to a ball, hope to bump into her Prince Charming. But in this reimagining of the well-known, much-beloved, familiar fairy story, the beautiful gown is a kimono from the Edo period. The ball is a small shrine tucked away from atop a flight of stone steps, and the prince, that would be my grandfather, Saotome Yukinari. I never thought my grandfather was particularly princely when I was a kid. There was nothing regal whatsoever about that old man in his faded hakama with bristles around his chin, who talked with boyish enthusiasm about the stars and spat out watermelon seeds into the front yard when he was eating. But maybe he looked like a prince when he was younger. When he first met my grandmother and stole her heart. The stars above mixed amongst the gentle droplets of falling snow twinkle. Away from the confines of my grandmother's old home, I can pick out more stars than I could before. Betelgeuse shines with renewed light, and Capella, come on man, just move on, I want to hear about the shrine. It's more vivid than ever, as though it's trying to outdo all the other stars in the sky. That makes sense. It is the third brightest star in the northern hemisphere, just behind Arcturus and Vega. Jesus, you love stars probably more than your grandfather did. I glance about curiously, searching for constellations. Which ones are easiest to find in the winter? There's Gemini, Taurus, and... I exhale softly, my breath escaping from my lips like steam. We finally reach the stone steps that lead up to the Jinguji shrine. The stone steps are frosted over with ice. They look steeper than ever before, beneath the stark light of the round full moon. Dangerous, too. I turn to my grandmother and ask, "Are you sure you'll be alright?" "Don't worry about me, she replies, as her face taut with concentration. "I won't let a few silly old stairs stop me. But if you slipped on the ice, I'll be alright. I might be an old biddy, but I have a lot of strength in me." My grandmother laughs and flexes her non-existent muscles. The long, elegant sleeves of her kimonos bunch up when she moves her arm, rolling back to her elbow to display a truly scandalous amount of bare skin. Her flesh was even whiter, like bone or fine china against the backdrop of an inky black sky. You have about as much muscular definition as I do, and I don't think Great-Grandma Kikuku would approve of you showing so much skin either. Oh, she didn't approve of anything much, although she was rather fond of Yukinari, and thank goodness for that. That was at least one thing I didn't have to fight her about. Did you fight with your mother often? More often than I would have liked. I thought she was so stern back then when I was a teenager. But I suppose I was quite the handful. Now that I'm a bit older, I can't blame her for losing her temper so often. I wish I could apologize, but... Oh well, my grandmother says, shaking her head. Our relationship thawed out a bit after I married Yukinari. She always told me I should count my lucky stars that a girl like me managed to find such a handsome man. And did you? Every single day. That's why I can't let a few stairs frighten me now. I glanced up at the stairs that led to the Jinguji shrine. I remember coming here with my grandparents and my parents when I was a small child. It was very hot. I think it was summer back then, and there were insects everywhere. I got bitten half to death by mosquitoes, and my face and back burned because I refused to wear sunscreen. After a few days, my skin started to peel away, and Otoko shrieked and said I looked like some sort of monster. Otoko spent much of the time climbing up those stairs, complaining. I, meanwhile, tried to count them. There were 76 all told. 76 stone steps leading a small, unkempt shrine, overrun with weeds that hardly anybody ever visited. The box for donations was completely empty back then. This was more than 12 years ago. It really has been a while, my grandmother says, ponderously, her eyes filled with all the stars of the night. When was the last time you came here, I asked. I don't remember. More than a decade, I should think. When I reached 75, all of a sudden my body stopped working like it should. It stopped listening to me. I'm starting to think that they're not going to show the shrine, which is a shame. They should be showing the shrine right now, and they should show her talking to us. Like, I feel like it would be so much more entertaining than this. They're kind of falling down on the job here, a little disappointing. It's like when they didn't have pictures for the parents. This is even worse. It's like we don't even get to see where we are. All this build up to the shrine, and we don't even get to see the shrine. My grandparents seemed to get very old very quickly after my 8th birthday. All of a sudden, my grandmother's back developed a hunch. Your grandfather's legs got stiff and heavy in the winter. Come on, just get to the damn point. And the two of them could no longer climb up the stairs to their local shrine. But I should be alright now, my grandmother says, her eyes narrowing with determination. I've been blessed with this new body, and I intend to push it to its limits. Just don't push it too far. I wouldn't want you to hurt yourself. The spirits may have given my grandmother a new body. I don't know if they'd be able to put it back together again if she happened to slip and fall down all 76 of these stairs. Don't fuss, it sounds like this place is gigantic. This was pretty interesting. Yeah, I really would like to see that. Don't fuss, your old grandma's tough. I'll be fine, she reassured me, smiling. I hope so. Then keep on hoping. Hope is the strongest form of magic there is. And with that, my grandmother places one foot encased snugly in her wooden sandals on the very first step. These stairs are dangerous enough to navigate during the day, but that becomes doubly so at night, particularly now that they're coated with a faint veneer of ice. These stairs don't have any handrails either, which is an added hazard. Still, despite these inconveniences, we're able to keep our balance. I follow along behind my grandmother, watching her. This sounds dangerous. Icy stairs with no handrail. Watching her back closely in case she trembles, but she remains surprisingly sturdy. I wonder if the kimono is difficult to move in. It looks like it might be constricting with the fabric wound so tightly around her body, especially her legs. She can't move them too much, but it doesn't seem to be a problem. Her neat, nimble stride doesn't falter. Reserves of energy from. Maybe it's the thought of seeing my grandfather again. Or maybe it's something even more inexplicable than that. Some kind of magic. The stars hang above me, bright and luminous in the velveteen sky. Damn it, stop talking about Capella! Man, we know, Capella looks good. Capella has never looked more breathtaking. I think it might make a nice photograph. You don't have to tell me that. We get it. It's nice, okay? Thinking about it, I should have brought my camera to my grandmother's house. God damn it. How long do you manage to drag this thought out for? I was in such a hurry to get away from my little sister, it slipped my mind. Some of the members of the photography club back in Tokyo would have loved to see a few shots of her quiet, snowy village, too. Oh well, I can always take some photos when I get back to my parents' house. Oh, they actually get to see the shrine. Thank God. Ah, we finally made it. We only get to see the top of the shrine, not all the cool stairs. Which was like, would have been really impressive to see. My grandmother sighs and wipes her forehead with the sleeve of her kimono. I am relieved though, because I thought I might not even get this. She sounds so exhausted. We might as well be a pair of polar explorers who have finally reached Antarctica. Fortunately, we didn't have as many casualties along the way as Captain Oates. Neither did we have to resort to eating our dogs. Alright. Not that we brought any dogs with us. My grandmother examines the old shrine, her expression downcast. Not much to look at, is it? I don't say anything. There isn't anything for me to say, and I half allowed myself to believe as I trudged up those stone steps that the same magic which holds my grandmother in its thrall would have worked its will upon this shrine too. The Jinguji shrine from my childhood was a run-down, dilapidated place in desperate need of renovation. A couple of fox statues flank the shrine, but they're crumbling against the edges. One of these foxes is missing a front paw and an ear, while the other's head has been sliced clean off. Part of me wonders if I'll find a decapitated fox head somewhere in the undergrowth, but I don't particularly feel like scrabbling around the frigid earth with my bare hands for it. The shrine itself is a humble wooden construction that's slowly rotting away. There are numerous holes in the roof, leaving it open to the elements, and it seems to be sinking into the ground on the right-hand side. No festivals take place here. Not anymore. I feel sleepy. My grandmother told me this place only opens during New Year's, so the parishioners group can sell charms and amulets to those foolhardy enough to brave all 76 stones in freezing weather, but I doubt there'd be enough local interest to keep that going. It's empty, barren, completely deserted. My grandmother and I are the only ones here. It's just us and the stars. The stars, the wind, and the snow. The wind seems to have picked up during our ascent, or maybe it's chillier here because we're standing at the hill's summit. I can look down across the whole village from this elevated position. It spreads before me in a murky, dim mass. I can see the roofs of houses, tall trees, and winding dirt streets that aren't real roads. Oh my god. Shut up, man. This village is so out of the way that it doesn't even have any street lamps. It's hard to pick out the God damn it. Everybody that's playing this game is desperate to know if the ghost of the husband is going to show up. And you're wasting our time describing like every little fucking detail. Shut up, you. It's hard to pick out the details of the village below, and soon my eyes begin to go blurry. Thank God, maybe you can stop describing things to me. I tear my gaze away, but what else is there for me to look at here? This little shrine is strangely depressing, particularly in the silence. The wind tugs at the hem of my coat and makes my hair flutter. I jam my fingers even deeper into the pockets of my pants. Not that it makes any real difference. The wind finds them regardless. The stars have never looked more menacing. Even Beetlejuice, oh god, for all its brightness, seems to be mocking me. Mocking us. Oh dear, this place really hasn't aged well. It doesn't match your memories? Not at all. This small shrine was never a hub of activity, but it used to be well maintained in the past. You never see anything like this. My grandmother gestures at the holes in the wooden boxes of the shrine. Maybe we can fix it up. It's a positive health hazard. I try to keep my tone light and joking, but the wind seems to suck the air from my lungs. The cold weather knives me, sliding beneath my coat and scarf so I shiver. I used to come here with my mother frequently. She said walking up the stairs was good exercise. What else did she come here for other than a workout? Oh, she was always praying for something or other. Mostly about me, I think. She was worried I'd never be able to find a husband because I was too ditzy and always daydreaming. She was wrong. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe the gods simply heard her prayers. She prayed long and hard and donated no small amount of money. We came here so often, the local priest always smiled and greeted me whenever we stopped by. This tiny shrine used to have a priest? Oh yes, back in the day. He was a funny man, very short, with a shiny bald head. He was called Sariyama. Some of the local children teased him, but he was a nice man. He was especially kind to me. He always told me he would pray for my future too. It sounded like a lot of people prayed for you back then. You're right, they must have thought I was completely hopeless. I think you're very capable myself. It's very sweet of you to say, dear, but I do wonder. Maybe it was foolish of me to come back here. I don't know why I thought it would match my memories. It was just a daydream. But sometimes we have to daydream just a little. If we don't, there's no magic in this world. That's what I always used to say, but my mother would sigh and shake her head and tell me not to be silly. She told me to look at things with my eyes, not with my heart. Perhaps I should have listened. I'm glad you didn't. I had fun with you today. Really? Don't you think I wasted your time? No. Why would I think that? Because I dragged you around the house looking for this silly kimono. And for what? There's nobody here to show it off to, other than these poor foxes. My grandmother gestures through the two stone deities, one with missing paw and ear, the other missing the head. Yeah, I know, because you described it earlier. It's a shame these little guys aren't in much of a position to judge my appearance. If they were, I'm sure they'd think you looked lovely. At my age, never. I think you've aged incredibly well, all things considered. Sure. You would say that, you charmer. You should watch out. Or all the girls will be after you. I'd prefer it if they didn't. Come on, come now. You don't need to act coy around your old grandmother. I know what your men are like. I'm really not that interested in girls right now, and I don't know if this is the kind of thing we should be discussing at a shrine. Why not? It might seem disrespectful. I can't imagine the gods will mind. They're probably happy to see other people visit this shrine, this old place again. It must be awfully lonely living up here without anybody to talk to, without anybody who cares. There's a small silence. The wind continues to moan mournfully. I swear, it almost sounds like the howl of a lonesome fox. When did the priest stop working here? When he died. He was an old man when I was a little girl, and time wasn't kind to him. He had kidney problems, I think. He had to go to a hospital in the next town over to recover, but by that point it was too late. He passed away when I was around your age. And the shrine had been empty ever since? I doubt anybody would want to take such a thankless job anyway. The government was cutting back on expenses. They closed a lot of the old shrines about 50 years ago because they cost too much to maintain. They let them go to ruin like this. My grandma exhaled softly. It's cold enough that her breath remains visible in the air, hanging like a small cloud a few inches away from her lips. It's sad, really, but that's how life is. Out with the old, in with the new. I'll be going that way myself soon enough. I wince. For some reason, her words wrench at something inside my chest. Don't say that, please. Why not? It is true. All things change in the name of progress. I know I've already had my time. I can't understand half the things you youngsters say, and that's alright. I'm too far behind. I can't keep up anymore. I've always had my head in the clouds. Don't be silly. You might not be able to use a computer, but that doesn't mean you deserve to. I'm not saying I deserve to, dear, but it's inevitable. If you don't maintain things properly, they start to fall apart, just like this old place. Grandma, I know it's upsetting, dear, but that's how the world is. People like shiny, bright, modern things, like those girls on the television yesterday. Painting princess? Palette princess. Exactly. I'm so out of touch, I can't even remember their name. I'm not a fan of Palette Princess either. Their music's pretty insipid. I wouldn't know. I'm no judge of music. I've fallen so far behind the times. Coming to this place had made one thing plain at least. What? My grandma does a small twirl in her kimono. The sleeves flutter around her slender arms. The wind catches in her dark hair, making it flutter like a curtain. She smells ever so faintly of hinoki wood. I hated the smell when I was a kid. Now, it's enough to make me feel emotional. I might look younger than I really am, but I still haven't changed. Not really. I'm living in the past, wearing this old kimono, coming to this old shrine, coveting things that are going to come to an end, that might have come to an end already. Maybe it's time to let this farce drop. Grandma, it was silly to think I could relive my youth. It is impossible to return to the day when I met Yukinari. That moment is long gone. But it still lives on inside you, doesn't it? Our memories are like photographs, but we store them inside our hearts. Whenever we get sad or lonely, we can rifle through the photograph album inside ourselves and recall all the good times, even the sad times, the special times. They're brief snapshots in our personal histories that might not matter all that much to anybody else, but help make us who we are. When my grandmother shakes her head, I'll always remember Yukinari, of course, but I'm afraid I might not be around to remember him for that much longer. You don't mean... I'm getting old, you. Coming to this place reaffirmed that. Time marches on, and soon it'll march right past me. Grandma. My voice catches in my throat. It hurts. This conversation hurts much, much more than I could have ever anticipated. Okay, so I think I'm just gonna leave it at that. The shrine was, well, I guess, what we should have expected. Yukinari didn't come, and we had a painful moment, and now we have to try and recover from it next time, because I gotta go to bed. Good night, everybody. That was rough. I never thought I'd grow to care so much about my strange, eccentric. I never thought I'd grow to care about my strange, eccentric grandmother quite this much. Though it sounds awful, I don't think the me of a few years ago would have particularly cared if my grandmother stumbled and broke a bone. Oh, Jesus, this sounds awful. Or caught a malignant cough, or passed away quietly in the middle of the night. I would have been sad, I suppose, but it would have been an abstract kind of sadness that comes when you feel obliged to be upset by something. I would have gone to the funeral, and I would have pretended to grieve, but her death wouldn't really have touched me. True. It wouldn't have hurt me. Okay. Yeah. That's because I didn't know her well enough. To me, my grandparents, though integral members of my family, weren't particularly important. They were burdens more than anything else, because I hated visiting them when I was a kid. I thought their old wooden house was painfully boring. All I could do was live on the tatami mats and playing on my handheld or reading comics. And when my handheld ran out of batteries or I finished the comics, I was lost in the doldrums of despair. I gotta go to bed.